You're listening to the Artist Athlete episode 50, yo. Yeah. This podcast is dedicated to Circus. It's a place for professionals in the industry to share their stories, viewpoints, and information, and a place for outsiders to get a sneak peek into this world. Hey, friends, fans, and enemies. I'm Shannon McKenna. I'm the host of the Artist Athlete podcast and the founder of theartistathlete.com. Since it is the 50th episode of this podcast, and I should say, actually, we've done more than 50 episodes, but we've had officially 50 guests on, which is kind of how I number them, not by how many episodes, because some people talk for a really long time and I let them talk because they're saying amazing things. In those cases, I'll have like a part 1 and a part 2, but I've had 50 guests as of this episode, and it's so exciting to me. And none of this would be possible without my amazing Patreons. Patreons, you guys rock. I made a little special, really silly 50-question game with my good friend Jen Crane, who a lot of you guys know from the internet as Cirque Physio. We're actually like besties in real life. And by that, I mean, I have a key to her house and I go over and play with her dog all the time. But so if you're a Patreon, go check that out. It's on the Patreon page. If you're not a Patreon, why the hell are you not a Patreon? You love this podcast. I know you do because you're listening. So go to patreon.com/theartistathlete. Because of my lag over the summer, some of my Patreons dropped off. And my goal to make this podcast fully sustainable, the minimum goal is $500 a month. So you can give as little as $1. $5 gets you a special sticker, which I will be sending out as soon as I'm back in the US. And it's a really great platform. I sometimes put little writings on there. I sometimes ask you guys questions about what you think for guests or other ideas. And I hope to keep growing that community. So patreon.com/theartistathlete. The other way that you guys can help this podcast is by, and this is completely free, BT dubs for all you cheapos out there. Respect. I respect a baller on a budget. So the other way you can help the podcast is whatever way you listen to this, if it's on Apple Music, Google Play, Spotify, whatever, leave it a rating and a review. That bumps it up in whatever computer algorithm is out there. I don't really know. I just know that it works and it's super helpful. And that's how other people access the show. And I actually want to read some of the reviews that I've gotten because some of them are really awesome. Jemna writes, I am a gymnast who recently transitioned to my first contract as an acrobat in a show in Vegas. Congratulations, that's awesome. I've been listening to this podcast for the past few months, and the episodes are all so interesting and informative. Shannon interviews a great variety of people from different disciplines, which helps me get insight into the circus world, as well as inform my own training. Looking forward to more. Keep up the great work, Shannon. Sure will, Gemma. Loose Game writes, I'm so glad I found this podcast. As a beginner in circus arts, it's refreshing and inspiring to hear the perspectives and stories of other circus artists. I love learning about the different things circus arts has to offer. Thank you so much for providing insight into this amazing world of circus. You're welcome, Loose Game. Keep rocking it. And speaking of amazing guests, I can't think of a more fabulous person to bring on for my 50th episode than Freyja Wild. Freyja began her career in Australia. She's my first Australian on the podcast. I can't believe I made it 50 episodes without an Australian circus performer. It's insane. I need more. Louis West, call me. Anyway, Freyja began her career in Australia as part of the Fruit Fly Circus and soon after school became a member of the Australian company Circa, where she honed her skills not only as a strong and confident performer, but as a physically and emotionally supportive ensemble member. She brought her skills as a hula hooper and in partner acrobatics to perform around the world as part of the Seven Fingers show, Passengers. And if you don't know who the Seven Fingers are, they're a very well-respected, internationally known, Montreal-based company. And you can find out more about them at sevenfingers.com. That's the number sevenfingers.com. The first half of this interview is for the hula hooping nerds. I'm not one of them. I'm sorry. I tried to ask Freyja the questions I knew you would want me to ask her about flow arts versus circus versus recreational hula hooping, like for fitness. But since I really wanted to talk about women and women's bodies in circus, which is something I know Freyja thinks a lot about and speaks to really eloquently and has a lot of experience kind of navigating the world of, we spent a lot of the second part of the interview being really honest about how women are portrayed in circus and also what it means to be a supportive artist in a company. So I hope y'all enjoy listening as much as I enjoyed talking to Freyja. This is my interview with Freyja Wild.
Yeah.
So let's get down to brass tacks here.
Let's do it.
Freyja Wild.
Hi.
Now your last name. Okay, I always start by having you kind of say in your own words who you are and what you do.
Sure. I'm Freyja Wild, as you said.
Yeah.
I have recently become Freyja Wild because I got married.
And you guys both changed your name to Wild, which is
did.
Badass.
Yeah. Basically, we were like, what do we do about the name thing? Like, we know that we want to have kids. We know that we want our kids to have the same name as us. I don't want to buy into the patriarchy by taking your name, but I also don't want to reverse the problem by you taking my name. And neither of us loved our last name, not that our families are great.
Sorry, Mom.
But so we just sat down and brainstormed a bunch of times.
What were the other ones that you were thinking about?
One of the ones that came up that we kind of liked because it had 2 letters from my name and 2 letters from his name was Eden. But then cool. We're like, wow, that's really biblical.
A little biblical.
And we're neither of us are religious at all. So we were like, nah, not good. But we tried to make anagrams of our last names and kind of look through family history and see if there were any names that came up for that. And then we had 3 or 4 sessions sitting down and talking about what we would do about our name. And in the first session, Wild just kind of came up from nowhere. It didn't fit in with any of the rules that we were using.
Which makes sense. It's wild.
Totally.
Love
I don't even know where it came from. It just was there on the page. Yeah. And then we were like, no, it's ridiculous. And then we just kept trying other options, and it just ended up feeling like the right thing. So
that's so cool.
And it really does now feel good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway. That's a very small part of who I am. That's kind of who I am in the last year or so. I'm from Melbourne, Australia, originally. And I began doing circus at age 7 through Circus Oz. And later on, a few years later, I went to the Fruit Fly Circus, which is really a really amazing place in Albury-Wodonga in Australia. And they have a program where if you are enrolled in a school program, then you can train with them.
Cool.
So, and it's
if you're enrolled in a school circus program?
No, just any public school. So their school, they have a school that's affiliated with the circus, so you can go to their school, which is a very small, I think when I was there were 80 students across from age 8 to 16. And it's just normal public school curriculum like any other public school, except that you do a certain number of hours of circus during school time each week, kind of instead of sport or PE.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I did that.
Yeah,
That's
it was
awesome.
amazing. It was honestly, I still feel like the fruit flies are a huge part of who I am, and I have so much time and so much respect and so much love for what they have done and are still doing for circus and just for kids, for development. It's actually amazing. I think circus is so important in so many ways that aren't to do with skill development, that are to do with general social development and body awareness and health and all of those kinds of things. Anyway, that's where I went to school.
Did you start hula hooping then?
Yeah, so I started hula hooping.
Freyja's a hula hooper, by the way, guys.
I'm relatively well known for doing that. I do other things.
Yes,
like
which I also want to talk about for sure.
We'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there.
But yeah, I started hula hooping. I love this story about how I met my coach. So I started hula hooping because in Australia, generally, especially at that time, a lot of circus is very generalist. People don't necessarily train in specific disciplines. They train across the board. So we learned to juggle, we learned to tumble, we learned group acrobatics, we learned to teeterboard, tight wire, all of the different, everything. So I did a little bit of hula hooping just because everybody kind of did. And then I ended up doing this really fun show called Backyard Barbecue, where I was I want to say 14, maybe 13 or 14. And I was playing the mum in the show. I had this bit where I did some hula hooping. I don't even remember what I did. We were performing in Sydney, and after the show one day, this woman came up to me. No introduction, no well done, no I like the show, just came up to me and immediately started critiquing my technique. And I was like,
damn.
Who the fuck are you?
Right?
Obviously, I was a teenager and I was really offended and indignant and how dare she just, walk into the dressing room while I'm finishing a show. So grumpy about it. And I remember it feeling very dramatic at the time, everything
kind of
does.
Rightfully so. I feel if today, you just walked off stage and someone was like, that was great, but this was shit and this was shit and this was shit.
Yeah, except without that was great bit.
Just this was shit.
You know
let
what
me
you're
have
doing.
a beer first or something.
Exactly. Anyway, turns out she then became my coach for the rest of my time at Fruit Flies. So we had the season in Sydney, and a few weeks later, I remember being back at the training space, and it was in the old training. They have a new space now, but it was in the old one that was shitty and freezing in winter, and But I was standing at the column where they put the schedule for the training, where you could see down the corridor, the entrance hall, the entrance doorway, and through the door walked this woman who I'd met in Sydney before, whose name, I still didn't know her name. I hadn't told her my name. She just had told me that my hula hooping was no good, and I got really pissed off. Then she walked in, and I remember, like I said, I'm a teenager at this point, so I was very dramatic.
Yeah.
Everything was a big deal.
Yeah.
I remember, disappearing into the bathroom in a rage because I was like, who is this woman? What is she doing in this? Why is she here? Oh my God. Anyway, I think I was probably mad for a day, and then got to know her, and she was my coach, and she is now someone that I respect hugely, and
So what's her name? What's her story?
She's amazing. Her name is Yoss Worth.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I probably don't know enough about her story to really fully tell it, but she's basically she's a dyke who she's covered in tattoos. Dope. She's very thin and wiry, kind of black hair, wears a lot of leather and very short shorts.
Love that.
She's amazing. She basically, I think her career was mostly made up of performing in queer clubs, underground in Sydney, in the, the LGBT scene in the 80s and 90s mostly. And at some point, I believe she trained in Russia with a hula hoop coach.
Because my follow-up question was going to be, where along the way did she learn that her technique was shit and
and fix it?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Look, I feel bad talking about her on something that's going to go public. So, Yoss, if you're listening to this, I'm sorry, but
we love you. I think it's out of a place of love, though.
Absolutely.
Nothing you've said so far has made me.
No. I just don't want to misrepresent her, but I'm pretty sure she trained in Russia at some point.
Yeah.
But then very heavily altered the technique that she learned. Her technique that she teaches is not classic Russian hula hoop technique. It's much more dynamic, much more grounded, much more about speed and control. I don't know if you the classic Russian hula hoopers are often on their toes, are often very kind of snake,
rhythmic is what I think of an Elena Lev or
no, circus style. So classic traditional circus hula hooping.
Yeah.
Because rhythmic gymnastics don't do any body splitting. So Yoss's thing is body splitting hoops. So having multiple hoops at different points on your body.
Cool.
And that's the biggest thing that she taught me. She basically that nailing that technique takes years and hours and just super dedication. And to be completely honest, I would not be able to do it if she didn't make me do it. for that many years. Like, just being there and being kind of yelled at by her.
And that's like you have one hula hoop like around your neck, one around your chest, one around your waist, one around your knees.
Yeah. The classic, the kind of one that I do most of the time now is 6, which is one on my knees, one on my butt, one on my waist, one like under boob, one chest, and then one on the hand. You can put it on your neck, but people don't, because then you can't lift your arms up.
Oh, gotcha. Cool.
Anyway, but yeah, she altered the technique quite a lot, and basically her approach to teaching is like, if you want to learn, she'll teach you, but if you're being a brat or you're not paying any attention, she just ignores you, which I think is great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Like, if you give a shit, then I give a shit, but if you don't, I don't care. Like, you can sit in my class and do nothing, and that's fine. But if you are interested in learning, then she's an amazing teacher.
Do you think I always wonder if there's like a personality type that we were talking earlier about like how jugglers are kind of mathematicians.
Yes.
Do you think there's like a personality type for hula hoopers?
I think yes. I think so, but I think that the people who YOS train are different. I think that mentality is a little closer to, you know what I think it's close to actually is hand balancing. It's like that. You need to just do the same thing over and over again. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit like madness. Yeah. You know, like it's
totally.
And I think juggling is similar in a sense, but there's I don't know, and I could be offending some people by saying this, but I think there's a higher level of physicality in that kind of hoop training, the kind that I've done. Like, I think not traditionally, but in a more generalization kind of sense, hula hoopers are less physically, it's less of a physically demanding discipline. Mm-hmm. The way that I train, I don't know how many other hula hoopers out there are like this. Like, I know a few who train like me, but the way that I train, I puff and I sweat, and it's hard work, and it's like takes a lot of muscular control, and it takes a lot of stamina and cardio fitness and that kind of thing, which is not a classic thing for hula hooping. I think hula hooping is generally seen as people who are tall and thin and flexible and pretty, making shapes with a hoop on their hand or foot, which is what hula hooping has been, especially in circus, for a really long time. But I think it's changed a lot in the last kind of 5-10 years. And I think that YOS has a lot to do with that. And a lot of people that she coached who are now out there performing and kind of showcasing this much more badass, totally intense version.
What I'm thinking about it though is like, because it's like when I watch you hula hoop, it's not like watching a flow artist hula hoop.
Yeah, no, it's very different.
There's like another whole, and I don't know anything about this, so I'm just kind of like what I've seen on Instagram and my friends who hula hoop. Like, there's also like this faction of the flow artists or the people who have a very different movement style of hula hoop.
Yeah.
And I'm interested to know, like, how is it the pedagogy of like knowing that Jan learned it in Russia and then kind of changed the technique and brought it to you all that keeps it feeling circus?
Yes, I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
It's YOS, by the way.
YOS.
But
thank you. Sorry. Now I'm offending. So we're good.
I really feel like with hula hooping, for me, today is amazing because it's basically, it's like an umbrella term to describe hundreds of different styles and ways of using a plastic circle, right? Like, some people use tiny ones that are, 30 centimeters wide for isolations, and it's a much more kind of manipulation, juggling style discipline. Some people do what I do mostly, which is like the on-body splitting stuff, which is very highly physical, highly demanding, all that kind of stuff. And I feel like that the style that I do fits a lot more into a contemporary circus setting because it involves things that I think contemporary circus lends itself to very well these days, which is high physicality, endurance, determinism. Determinism? No, that's not what I'm talking about. It's a whole different thing. Determination.
Yeah. Way less colonial.
Exactly. But all of these things that I think come under the umbrella of contemporary circus. But like I said, in terms of hula hooping, there is also the whole flow arts community, which again is very broad. There are flow artists who like to dance in fields with daisies and long skirts. And it's about the feeling and the connection and the freedom of movement. And then there are flow artists who are hugely techie, like nerds who, like this one woman I know, Emma McKenna, she's incredible.
Yeah.
And basically she took a lot of technique from poi.
Oh, cool.
And then transferred it over to two hoop stuff. So her real specialty is with two hoops, like one in each hand kind of manipulation stuff. And the way that she trains is like do everything on both sides. She has, I don't know, 6 or 8 different grips that she explains and then teaches you how to do certain tricks from every single one of those grips so that you know that at any point you're free to be able to go into something else that you know because you're in a familiar position. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, it's a very nerdy way of looking at breaking down tricks. So I guess to answer your question about the circus style and where it came from, I think it's older than Yas. Yeah. Like I think she's done a lot to bring it into a contemporary setting and make it more popular, for sure. But also, I think like hula hooping was in circus before it was patented by whoever did that in the 1950s.
What are you talking? What?
There was a toy company. What are they called? Like Whammo Toys, I think.
Is this an Australian thing?
No, but
Whammo Toys. Okay, I'm going to look it up. I'm going to put it in the show notes for you guys.
I'm pretty sure it's Whammo Toys. I could be misremembering that. But basically there was a guy who, funny you say Australia, in research that I've done, and I could be wrong, this guy traveled to Australia in the 50s and saw in a children's toy store a plastic hula hoop for sale. Maybe a wooden hula hoop, but a hula hoop for sale. And then when he went back to, I think it's San Francisco, he basically created a plastic hula hoop and him and his buddy started to give these hula hoops around at playgrounds all over the States. And then they patented the hula hoop.
Oh,
and
cool.
then it became this huge craze.
Yeah.
In the 50s.
Yeah.
That was like...
It was like an exercise thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And a lot of people think that that's the origin of the hula hoop, which is not true. Like, I'm pretty sure traditional circuses had hula hoopers in them from before that.
Cool.
I'm not an expert on hula hoop history. And also, it's like something that changes depending on who you ask.
Yeah, sure.
It's,
But that's good. You heard it here second, third hand.
At some point.
Great. Hula hoops not invented by some dude in San Francisco in the 1950s.
Even though he says he did.
Of course he does.
Yeah.
Okay, so you learned to hula hoop, and then was Circa like your first big company that you worked for?
Absolutely.
Okay, so when did that happen for you?
Really early.
Yeah.
I got a super lucky break. I mean, what is luck? But I graduated from the Fruit Flies at 17, which is when you graduate high school.
Yeah.
I spent like a year kind of working in Melbourne, teaching a bit, doing little gigs here and there. I did like a 6-week contract with a traditional circus, lions and shit. That was fun, living in a caravan, all that. Not my bag, to be honest. Yeah, and then at some point during that year, some really close friends of mine had been invited to an audition with Circa. And I was like, oh, sorry, I should backtrack for a second. In my final year at the Fruit Flies, I was touring and we were in Brisbane and we went to see a show by Circa called By the Light of Stars That Are No Longer. And it blew my mind. Like I had never seen circus like that before, and I was completely transported and amazed by the reach that this kind of work had. You know, it was contemporary and it was moving and it was very, I don't know, it spoke to me in a way that nothing ever had before. And so, of course, from that moment, I was there with, I don't know if you know Bridie Hooper.
Yeah. So
her and I were touring together with this.
She's a steps artist. I would say like bendy, beautiful mover. Yeah.
She's all of those things. Yeah, sure. As well as an incredibly interesting and creative, amazing person. Like she's definitely up there on the list of amazing people. But so she and I, both 17, went to see this show, fell in love, and I think both of us went back like 2 or 3 nights in a row to see this show. We were obsessed. Anyway, so like a year or year and a half later, a few of my friends were invited to an audition. And at that point, you had to be invited to audition. And I think actually even now they don't really do auditions. It's like a bit more of a who you know situation.
Sure. So they got invited because they knew someone in the cast or they knew
I'm not entirely sure. I know that, so the audition was for a 1-month training intensive in Brisbane with the current ensemble, at that point there were 4 of them. You know, like it was tiny.
So crazy.
Yeah.
Knowing like what they are now.
Exactly. Yeah. So, you know, it was, I had fallen in love with Circa because I saw that show, but they weren't anywhere near as well known as they are now. Mm-hmm. Like, they were a blip on the radar at that point. I should mention Circa used to be Rock and Roll Circus. So like in the 80s, there was a bunch of rebellious circus artists who were really badass and awesome and made this company called Rock and Roll Circus. That was exactly what it says on the tin, you know, like really cool.
Cool.
Again, like leather clad. Like, yeah. I'm pretty sure Yoss actually performed with Rock and Roll for a while. Like they were really cool. And then at some point they were looking for a new artistic director and Yaron took the role and then just completely shifted the direction of the company. Mm. I think a fair few people are still a bit sore about that. Definitely completely changed. Like Circa is in no way what it was when it was Rock and Roll Circus. I think there are people who are a bit sad about the loss of what it used to be. But anyway, I think that the success of Circa is a really amazing thing. And anyway, sorry, I'm jumping all over the place.
No, it's great. It's great. This is pretty par for the course.
Okay, yeah, I bet.
So you got involved because you like snuck into this audition, or
yeah,
they got invited and then what did...
Well, I was like, shit, I need to be there. Yeah. I need to get there somehow. I don't even know how. I think I wrote to Yaron. I don't know how I did it, but I ended up in the audition. I can't remember, but I definitely ended up auditioning in the Hardy Street Studios in Melbourne, this like studio that was owned by a few other circus performers, this tiny little shed. Yeah, and ended up me and it was Jessie Scott and Lachlan Macaulay and Carly Vitalik and Emma Sargent and I'm trying to remember who else was there, and got like kind of into the company at that point. Yeah, we all ended up doing this month-long training intensive with, and there was also like this amazing contemporary dancer from somewhere in South America who was there and a break dancer from Brisbane who was part of it. Like it was a very broad spectrum of people who were doing this training intensive. Yeah, so at the end of that month, most of those people whose names I've just mentioned ended up getting contracts straight away. Mm-hmm. And I didn't, and I was really sad about it. I had a little contract that was like doing the kids show in which, you know, the whole reason that I wanted to go and work with them was this incredible
you wanted to make art.
Exactly. I was like, no. Anyway, it was great. It was actually a really fun show. And then after a few months, I did a few more contracts with them. Basically, my first year with them was kind of me just being really fucking determined and like, I want to be a part of this and I'm not going to go away and I'll work as hard as you want. And I was just like hungry for learning, like learning what it was like to be a part of this contemporary world that was nothing like the training that I had had. Like the Fruit Flies are very much like if you've ever seen a Circus Oz show, that's most of the trainers at Fruit Flies were ex-Circus Oz performers, and it was at that time very kind of slapstick, that style of circus.
I think of that as more traditional or like presentational.
Yeah.
It's like act,
totally,
character, trick.
Yeah.
It's not like Circa where it's like, is this dance? Is this circus? Am I crying? Am I laughing? You know, like that.
Yeah. So yeah, I was really interested in that, but just fully having no idea how to do that. And so then, yeah, I think it was at the end of, I remember signing a full-time contract on my birthday, and I'm pretty sure that was my 20th birthday. Okay. That was like a year or so, a couple of years before I ended up being full-time with them. That said, definitely I was full-time in terms of energy and commitment to wanting that full-time contract. And then from then on, like I was with Circa for 7 years.
Circa.
Yeah, which was then properly full-time. Like we would tour between 9 and 11 months of every year nonstop. Like it was a lot of work, but
nice. I want to, because I'm like looking at the time and I'm like you're getting the time because I know you have a gig and I want to get to this because like this is like, especially very recently since you've been on Passengers with the fingers, like everyone is looking at these Instagram posts of you basing three highs.
Yeah.
And they're like, that's the badass redhead who bases the three highs. So I want to ask a question that incorporates like your skills in Circa and basing and being a woman in that position and what it took to train that, but I don't know how to ask that question. So can you just talk about it?
Yeah, of course. because it's huge. It's actually so
huge. It is huge.
Yeah.
And
I feel like there are, in order to ask about that, you'd need to ask like 20 different questions.
Right.
Because there are so many elements to it. I've been thinking about this. I think about this shit all the time. All the time. I'm so interested in...
Because it's the first time I feel like on like a major international stage. Well, I don't know if I can say the first time, but definitely in like our cycle of artists that kind of thing is happening.
I think it's definitely not the first time.
Yeah.
I can tell you that for sure. Like one of the things I like to talk about a lot is the fact that we all stand on the shoulders of the people who did this before us. And there's no way that I would be able to be doing what I'm doing now if it wasn't for the incredible, strong women that I was watching when I was growing up.
Nice, yeah.
The women of Circus Oz in the 90s who were so badass and so strong and so just like owning their presence on stage. And to me, I think the definition of strong woman gets thrown around a lot these days. It's kind of like a hot topic at the moment. It's like representing strong women on stage. And I'm all for that. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's kind of your fault. You should be.
Yeah. But I really, I'm going to say battle, but I feel like that's putting it a bit strongly, in my career has been just grappling with other people's definition of what a strong woman should be. And I really don't want to subscribe to anyone else's idea of what a strong woman should be. I'm myself. And honestly, women are strong.
Yeah.
Like, they just are.
Yeah.
Women give life, women fucking run this world, even if they don't get the credit for it. And so I just feel like a tiny, beautiful, leggy blonde who is doing an aerial act on stage may be subscribing to a very classic version of femininity, but she's still a strong woman.
For sure.
Regardless of how you look at it. And I think that's a bit of a problem that we have these days, is that people are like, oh, no, you have to be bigger and muscly and kind of look a little bit like a man in order to represent being a strong woman on stage. Like, no.
But I think what's unique about your representation of strong women is, like, yes, to do an aerial hoop number takes an immense amount of strength and ability and all of that. But that accompany Circa first, because they definitely showcase women in kind of a way that you don't see in other companies. Mm-hmm. But the fingers too, like, I don't know another contemporary circus show where I've seen like a woman base a 3 high. And not because there aren't women out there who can't do it, but it's just not what immediately comes to people's minds, or I don't know why not.
I do think I have a bit of a unique position because I'm like, it's funny, existing in this world of tiny people can make one feel like they're large when they're not.
And how tall are you?
I'm like 6'4". No, 6'4", fucking hell. 5'4". I'm 5'4".
5'4". I appreciate you converting from metric for us. So
yeah, I think it's like 165 centimeters. 164 centimeters.
Yeah, me too. I'm 5'4".
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like a giant.
Totally.
All the time.
Which is not true.
Right.
And then you go and stand in a crowd of normal people and you're like, oh, I'm tiny. But I think, sorry, to get back to the point, I think I have a unique position because I look quite feminine. I look quite slender, and therefore I can kind of go under the radar a little bit. I'm being
interesting,
very honest about this right now.
Yeah.
But people don't employ women who look like women very often in the circus, which is a huge shame. I think it's changing, and I think it's happening more and more. And I think, like, I've definitely had a lot of times in my career where I feel myself slimming down or getting more muscular, and I've been like, oh, I actually don't want this. I want to stay a bit soft. I want to keep my boobs. I want to keep my ass. I want to be on stage representing what a woman's body actually looks like, even though I'm aware that I'm like not, like, I'm definitely.
But like in comparison, again, like to put you on a stage with a bunch of other acrobats, like you look like you're super tall.
Yeah.
Or like super large.
Totally.
I'm making air quotes, by the way, because Freyja's not large.
But in
compared, exactly.
Totally.
Which is, like, again, we're talking about, like, so what made them hire you, or who in this whole world was like, oh, actually, like, we can put her on stage and people will still watch it. It's okay. She doesn't have to be, 105 pounds and 4'9".
Euron, definitely. Euron,
who is the artistic director of Circa.
Circa, yes. It's really nice to hear you say and recognize the fact that Circa are representing strong women on stage, because I believe that 100%, and I don't think anybody has any grounding to say otherwise. That said, a lot of people do, because at the same time, all of those amazing strong women who are represented on Circus stages, most of them are smaller than I am. Mm-hmm. Most of them are still quote unquote acrobat shaped or sized. But they're still, I look at the women of Circa and I'm like, what a beautifully diverse and incredible bunch of, and the men, the people, the performers in Circa. I just really see them as beautiful bodies who are all very different. And the thing about that work is it's intensely physical. And it's really difficult to be able to do that work if you're not at your physical peak. And I mean, that's not to say that someone who's larger can't be at their physical peak, but I just think that it's much more normal. It's much more common for people to look very
totally.
fit.
But I think what we were talking about like the South American trio.
Yeah.
Like the woman who bases that, her legs must look like freaking tree trunks.
They do.
They have to.
Absolutely. But she probably doesn't do a bunch of the other shit that you have to do a Circa ensemble show. This is the thing. So
this is a very good point.
It's like you're not just doing your act. You're doing improvised scenes. You're probably running around like crazy. You probably don't leave the stage for more than a couple of seconds at a time during a 90-minute show. And so it's like it's a cardio workout every single show. And it's like, I think I feel like I'm getting off track a bit here. What I wanted to say is that Euron has copped a lot of flack for not hiring diverse bodies.
Really?
Absolutely. Yeah. Australia is really sensitive to that. And I love that about it, actually.
Yeah.
I really think that's important. And I think that we need to be loud about that. And I think we need to be making more space for different bodies, different people, different abilities on stage. And I think a lot of people see the fact that most of circus performers are very fit, very young, and very white, which is true. All of that is true.
Yeah.
And I don't think for any reason I should deny that. But at the same time, I really do think they're representing women in a strong way. And it's like we were talking before about how we exist in such a specific subset of society, and we can see progress and we can see the kind of next step in societal progress.
Sure.
As artists, as people who are part of this world. But in order to make a company that survives, you need work that is palatable to a wider audience. And the shit reality about that is that audiences want to see certain bodies. And I think if we can push those boundaries slowly and gently and try and welcome the rest of the world into the way that we see the world, then it's going to be much more effective. Because if you just suddenly come at people with this whole different way of looking at things, it's going to be a bit of a shock. And I think at the same time as saying that, there are a number of companies, and I know there are a lot of Australian companies out there who have like proper women bodies on stage, who have an entire cast of Indigenous people in a show. Like there are works that are doing this. There's this amazing Australian company called Briefs. I don't know if you know about them.
Yeah.
And they have the two biggest shows that they have, which are Briefs, which are all men, all drag queens. It's like boylesque, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
And so wonderfully representative of the diverse world that we live in. And then at the same time, they have Hot Brown Honey, which is all brown women doing.
That's a great show.
Amazing. It's an amazing show. And
I
so
think they're in Vegas now or something, hey?
I don't know.
I don't know why I just said it like I was Irish. I
feel
think
like
they're in Vegas or something, hey? Or Canadian. Oh, no.
I think you might be thinking of Blanc de Blanc, which is a very different thing.
No.
Okay.
No, I'm thinking of Hot Brown Honey. But or maybe I'm thinking of I don't know. There aren't too many shows like that out there.
No, it's true. That could be. I'm not sure.
I'll have to look it up.
Yeah.
I'll message you later if I find something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Australian specific, yes. But I'm more thinking about like, so you're working with the Seven Fingers now, you're on Passengers, and you and Connor on together, which is like the holy grail of circus life.
Yeah.
Like you and your partner on like an internationally touring show so when they hired you, did they hire you to hula hoop, to be a bass with just they didn't know why or what? I mean, obviously they like knew that you were a good, I'm just going to take my foot.
That's fine. It's fine. I had been in contact with Shayna for years, back and forth. I wrote to her when I saw Queen of the Night, and I was like, I want to work with you. I really like your work. At that point, I was kind of trying to leave Circa unsuccessfully. And they make it hard for you to leave if they don't want you to leave. And basically, we wrote back and forth for maybe 5 years when I would write her when I was available and she wouldn't have anything. And then she would write me when she needed someone and I wasn't available. And I think she just decided she wanted to work with me. She told me when I got here she just really liked the way that I write.
Oh, nice. That's so cool.
Yeah. And honestly,
that gives me so much hope.
More and more, I'm realizing that this industry, you know that saying, it's not about what you know, it's about who you know.
For sure.
And it's so true. It's so true. But also I think it's about who you are. Like, really, contemporary circus specifically, because so much of it, like the Seven Fingers, their whole thing is about telling human stories. It's really amazing being part of this company because really the only thing they give a shit about is if you're a nice person. Like, of course they want people with high technique, of course they want good shows, but if they've got someone who's got high technique and they're an asshole, they're out the door so fast. It's like, it's about being human and relatable and having an enjoyable place to work. And I think that's a real strong point of theirs. It's like they managed to keep this company, which is actually now really quite big, or at least it has a big reputation, to feeling like a family still. It's amazing. So basically, I think Shayna just decided that I was a nice person. And then when I wrote to her and was like, I'm looking for a contract with my husband, it was a bit of a negotiation because she had no idea who he was. So we kind of we had a lot of chats back and forth. But yeah, she ended up hiring both of us. And I think she's really glad.
Yeah.
Because
I would hope so. Yeah. Because he's bomb too.
He's amazing. Yeah. He's amazing. And again, like I think both of us have this thing, which we're very aware of, which makes it difficult when applying for work, is that we're both much better in the room than we are on video. That's like, you know, put me in a room with people and I know that I'm gonna bust my ass to foster a really healthy culture. I'm going to support everyone as much as I can. I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to be as innovative as possible and try and encourage everyone else to be innovative. And I'm going to and I feel like, and Connor is the same, which is, of course, why we get along so well. Like, we work really hard, but a really huge part of the work that we do and value is about culture and about healthy working environment and about, you know, being able to feel safe, feel like emotionally and artistically, creatively safe in a space. So that
I love that you say that.
Yeah.
Because I feel like people are always like, oh, it takes so much trust physically to do what you do. And I'm like...
And mentally.
Right.
Emotionally.
Sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because when you're in a space, like creating a show, especially one, like we spent 4 months creating this show with a bunch of people in their early 20s, which is a tumultuous time.
I want to scream at whoever is playing that loud radio. Yeah. It's fine as long as...
It's fine.
I find as long as I recognize it, as long as I'm like, there's a very loud radio playing in the background.
People are like, we hear it. We
cool,
know.
We'll block it out. Sorry, you were saying creation.
Yeah. Well, I just feel like it can be such a vulnerable space. Regardless of the stakes involved, if you're being asked to create something out of your heart, which particularly at the Fingers is a huge part of it. I mean, this creation was a really, I don't know how much you know about Raph.
I know that he passed away.
Yeah. Which happened 6 months before we started this creation.
And he was supposed to be on the project, or?
Probably. I mean, he was like Shayna's right hand. Yeah. And so the main theme song of our show, he wrote.
Oh, wow.
He wrote it originally for Crystal, but they ended up going with like one composer for the whole thing, so they didn't use his composition. But I'm so glad because now it's ours and it's so beautiful. And so I guess, the point that I was getting at is that this process, particularly for Shayna, I think, and a lot of other people in the room, was kind of grieving process.
Wow.
So to be in that space for 4 months every day, Connor and I didn't know Raf at all, and we had just arrived in this community who were rocked hugely by this event. But just to say, anyway, at any time, any creation is a vulnerable space. But in particular, this one really was. And I know Connor and I spent a lot of time, like we both read this really amazing book called The Culture Code.
The Culture Code.
Which is about successful groups.
Yeah.
It's a really amazing book. But both of us read that on the recommendation of a friend, on the recommendation of Louis West, actually, who... Sorry, no, I'm not going to talk about Louis now. I'm going to talk about the book. The book is amazing, and the book...
I've referenced him on the podcast before, actually.
Yeah,
never had him on, but
he's a
great
very
acrobat.
Good friend. Yeah. Amazing person.
Great person.
Like, worth it. You should track him down.
I know, yeah.
I'm going to go see him in Berlin soon.
Is he with Circa still?
No, he's with GOM.
Okay.
They're doing Out of Chaos in Berlin. It
just
started. And
I'm sorry, I don't know why I keep doing that with Gravity and Other Myths, because like I know that they're in the Chameleon, but they're like Australian circus company at the Chameleon, so they're basically
there are a lot
Circa
of similarities.
in my brain. Even though I know they're not, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway.
But yeah, anyway, so during this creation process, Connor and I both read this book and then just did our very best to apply as much as we had learned from what this guy was talking about building good culture and good working relationships in groups to try and...
So cool.
It's really cool. But I mean, I have to say, we put a lot of effort into it, but also Shayna is amazing like that. Like she wears her heart on her sleeve, and she's a very emotional and instinctual person, but she is also incredibly pragmatic and really good at kind of making a clear distinction between when she needs to be creative and emotional and kind of get to the heartstrings moment of a scene or something that she's creating. But then when it comes down to the logistics of a rigging situation or something like that, she puts her logical hat on, and it's cool. It's really, and so I think having her in the room being kind of mama overseeing everything made the whole thing really, really great.
Nice.
I don't even know what question you asked.
I have no idea what... Oh, I know. I keep trying to be like, some bullshit about women representation on stage. And you're like, no, but hearts and people. And I'm like, yeah, actually this.
But also, actually, no, it's good that you mentioned that again, because we started talking about it. And
So like, okay, yes, it's a very vulnerable, emotional place. But also, you know, I have to think about like Traces, where I was like looking at this like, oh, great, another girl in a red dress, you know, and like... that representation of women was still there.
Absolutely.
But not in Passengers.
No, because I was there.
Exactly. No, I'm glad you said it, not me.
Well, I mean, no.
But where was the moment where you were like, oh, we're putting this person up in a 3-high? Like, I'm going to base it. Or was it like always like, yeah, this is what
Well, that was Shayna,
do.
Actually.
Really?
I mean, yes, it's been what I do for sure. And I think that's, I don't know whether that's part of why I got the job. I mean, I think, like I said, she wanted to hire me because she liked who I was. And I think it's a bonus that I have these skills as well. But I also have issues with the red dress moment in Traces. That said, that show is over 10 years old now, and I think it is representative of its time, and it's not relevant anymore. We've moved on, as has the rest of the world, as has this company, you know, and I think Shayna and Gypsy and Isa, like the women of the Fingers, are all really 100% behind accurate
they're all
female representation. So... They really are. They all are. And I think Shayna just kind of knew that basing 3-highs was something that I had done and really wanted it in the show. And we ended up doing it with Connor in the middle because no one else had really trained 3-highs before we got there. So like I was the middle. I am the person with the most experience middling 3-highs, and Connor is the person with the second most experience middling 3-highs. And we basically just didn't really have enough time to safely train someone else up for that. So we ended up putting him in the middle. So he does a 5-minute solo pole act, which is followed by this quite hectic group acrobatic scene where everyone's running around doing lots of stuff. So he comes off the pole, has a very fast costume change, and then runs back on stage, bases a whole lot of other things, toss and catches people and does some tumbling, and then middles a 3-high.
Only
so
Connor.
by the time we're doing that, he's like shaking and
Only
sweating.
Connor. Well, I remember seeing him in Wunderkamp.
Yeah, in Berlin.
In Berlin, and he did like a 9-minute pole act.
11.
So 11.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah,
I was thinking it was 7. And I was like, no, it was longer than that night. No, 11 minutes.
Yeah.
So if anyone could have, good on him.
Yeah, he's got stamina for sure. He's like
respect.
Yeah, he trains really hard and he has incredibly high standards.
So my last question always, I created this podcast was like, I was 22 when I really was like, right then I'm going to become a circus artist. I got out of school for like physical theater. I was like, circus, no, that's what I'm going to do. But I had no access to the world, or I didn't know any other performers. Mm-hmm. And so I was always like, man, I wish I could have some advice on this whole thing. Mm-hmm. So the last question I always ask is, what advice would you give to yourself at the beginning of your career?
Oof. At the beginning of my...
And you can define that...
Okay.
I would say professional for you.
Okay.
Yeah. Or anywhere along the line, if you had a time machine and could go back and be like, yo, Freyja, stop that, or do more of that.
The biggest thing that's coming to mind is something that I didn't run into because I think I was really lucky, but that I've seen a lot of other young women running into, which is going too hard too fast. And when like we're talking about female representation and strong women on stage, one of the things that makes me sad is that I've seen so many young women who are working to be bases, to do strong things, get injured. And more often than not, it's because they're doing something that they weren't quite ready for. Or they were pushing to attain a level of strength that is standard for porters. There's like a whole kind of training regime that most hand-to-hand porters do. Most hand-to-hand porters are men. And I think a really important thing about representing female strength is to remember that it's female strength. And as much as equality is important, and I believe that everybody should have the same opportunities and that no one should ever tell you what you can and can't do, you really need to tell yourself what you can and can't do. And if your body is saying no, you need to listen. I think that's the biggest piece of advice I would give to particularly young women trying to be strong and do things. When you're young, you know, when you're like in your late teens, early 20s, you just want to fucking do shit, right? You just want to do it.
Yeah. And you have the energy for it.
I get that. Exactly. You have the energy for it. But our bodies are different. They just are. And I mean, some people are lucky, but honestly, we deal with so much more shit than men do. Like I had a knee injury at 21. I busted my ACL. It wasn't from basing. It was from a high impact like landing. I also did it again at 26, which was also from a landing. So for me, in my weak point is impact, not weight bearing. But I think it's important to find your own strengths and weaknesses and work to those. So I realized when I did that injury, all of this research behind women playing soccer who do the same injury, and a really vast majority of them are ovulating when they injure their knee.
Oh, interesting.
So the thing that I think is really worth being aware of is that your hormonal cycle affects your muscles really strongly. And like, if it's the first day of your period and you don't feel like you want to train, just take it easy. You know, like I honestly think that's a really important thing to listen to, and it sucks.
Such good advice, though.
It sucks is this whole like we're in this world where we're like empowerment and equality and like we can do anything that men can do, and it's like totally, but it's different. And it has to be different because it's our biology and it's the way that our bodies work. And I think there are always exceptions, you know, like I know this one woman who had a knee injury, and when they went in to do the surgery, they realized she has a second meniscus. So she's like totally extra reinforced. And then she broke her other ACL and didn't have surgery, and it healed on its own. And she had like a bone density scan, and they realized that her bone density is twice that of a normal person. And she's like a really incredible female base, but she has superpowers. Like literally.
She's like a literal superhuman. Like she has a backup meniscus.
And I think it's worth knowing that about people. Like I know, like if you're looking at me and you're thinking, I want to be able to do what she can do, it took me 10 years to get to the point where I could base a 3-high. It took me 10 years of basing easier things, of middling a lot of 3-highs, of doing a lot of group acrobatics, of working a lot, of spending a lot of time on my pelvic floor and core strength. Like, It's not something that I just jumped into. It's something that took a really long time. And I think that it happened that way for me just by chance. I wasn't deliberately going slow. I was just kind of doing what was available to me when it was available. And I had people around me who were really supportive and protective and aware of body mechanics and that kind of thing. But I think that's the biggest thing that I would say. It's like nothing is worth injuring your body. No show, no trick, no Instagram video is worth injuring your body.
Called out, yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sweet.
Well, thank you,
really
Freyja.
You're so welcome.
Get the hell out of here.
Thanks for having me on.
That was my interview with Freyja Wild. And don't worry, guys, I made sure she made it to her gig on time. Okay, first up, I did some research on the hula hoop, and it turns out that the American she was talking about who went to Australia and made the hula hoop super popular, his name was Richard Knurr, and his company was Whammo Toys. In addition to popularizing the hula hoop, he also allegedly invented the frisbee, the hacky sack, and the slip and slide, all of which were probably around a lot longer as well. As I mentioned in the interview, I've attached some articles about the history of hula hooping. They're pretty shallow. If anyone wants to do any more extensive research or has extensive research on the hula hoop in circus, let me know. Come on the podcast. That would be pretty cool. All of that is to say, Freyja's 100% right. Of course, hula hoops, this American made a lot of money off of them, but actually they've been around forever. Something that really struck me about Freyja and why I think I have so much respect for her and so many other people do is in addition to her work technically, in addition to her hard work as a businesswoman and as a performer, she's also really works hard to establish a sense of trust and a sense of safety in the communities that she's a part of. Even sitting across from her at brunch, you feel at home, you feel kind of safe. And that's a really important quality that a performer who wants to work with someone like the Fingers might want to consider developing, because you're not alone on stage. You're not just a soloist doing an act. You're creating something with a group of people. And that can be a very vulnerable, very scary thing to do. And the best companies choose people not because of their skill set. Obviously, that's in place as well, but also because they foster an environment where they can really create something wonderful that people want to watch. Of course, the other thing I feel like I have to touch on and address, and I really want to delve into in more episodes with more people who think about this and study this, but I thought Freyja was a perfect example because not only is she thinking and talking about women's bodies in circus, but she's also a woman with a body in circus who's using it very differently than the stereotypical strength or the stereotypical way that women are portrayed on stage. Now, I do want to stress that just because something is a stereotype or just because you may be the sparkly girl on the hoop in the air, or you may be the beautiful contortionist, does not mean you are not a badass who works her ass off to hone a skill that very few people can do. And I think that's absolutely incredible. But I do think that I see a greater crossover between men who do traditionally more quote unquote women's apparatuses than I do women, and I'm talking in super heteronormative terms or gender normative terms. I recognize that, but this discussion is more about audience perceptions than it is about social changes within societal norms around gender. So sorry about that. That's another conversation for another day, but I want to just recognize that and respect it. But I see a lot more crossover between men who are occupying more traditionally women's disciplines or techniques. A lot of fabulous male contortionists, fabulous hoop artists, silks artists, hand-in-hand flyers, though that's kind of also been traditionally male. But I see a lot more crossover in that than I see women porters, and I'm talking on a very high level, than I see women porting banking, or women porting Russian bar, or women being in places of traditional demonstrations of strength. And I really loved what Freyja said about it, about how the change happens slowly. And the change has to happen in a way that also honors femininity and honors that this is a woman's body doing the work. And it's going to be different than the way a man does the work. But circus, and I remember this interview I did with Terry Crane a while ago where he said circus is about highlighting differences. And I think it's so special and so amazing when somebody takes a chance and puts something on stage that is different, that is new, that is exciting. And I'm really looking forward to an era in which people give women more opportunities to occupy those places of strength and more opportunities for men or people who represent as men to occupy places of vulnerability or beauty in the more traditional feminine aspect of. If you want to find Freyja online, she is on Instagram at, Freymas? Freymes is her Instagram handle. She's got a wonderful account that kind of mixes hula hooping with her personal life, and it's super sweet and cool. She's also online. Her website is wildfreyja.com. That's Freyja, wildfreyja.com. To find me online and all the different platforms, I am on Instagram at _artist_athlete. I'm on Facebook, The Artist Athlete. My podcast group on Facebook is Friends of the Artist Athlete, but I much prefer Patreon, patreon.com/The Artist Athlete. Where else am I? Oh yeah, my website. theartistathlete.com. And that has my online courses. It has a full listing of podcasts. It has other gear I love to use for circus and so much more. So check that out. Next week on the podcast, I just want to announce it because I'm super excited. I have another badass woman in circus. Tanya Burko will be on the show. So tune in for that. And I will talk at you next week, friends, fans, and enemies. The Artist Athlete podcast is supported solely by donations from people like you. Here's what some of those people have to say.
Aloha! My name is Beth Russell, and I live on the beautiful island of Maui, Hawaii. I am an aerial artist and movement instructor specializing in chakra yoga to keep me balanced and grounded. I play with silks, trapeze, lyra, rope, acro, aerial yoga and dance, slacklining, pole, bungee, and climbing. Really anything that goes up and allows me to explore 3D space. You can find my dedicated aerial page on Instagram at Maui Aerialist. If you find yourself coming to Maui, let's play.
Hey there, friends, fans, and enemies. This is Chris Alston, Patreon of the Artist Athlete podcast. Straps artist and lyra performer and acrobat out of Greenville, South Carolina. So, if you're ever passing through, make sure to stop in and see me and my friends. We have a wonderful space, and we'd love to see you.
Hi, my name is Erica Lee. I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm an aerialist. I teach performing arts to elementary school during the day and do pole and slings and rope by night. I really, really like the Artist Athlete podcast because it gives me a lot of circus goals to look forward to. It gives me a lot of insight on what's going on around the world in circus, and that's why I'm Patreon.
Hello, all. Thank you for tuning in to the Artist Athlete podcast. I am Opal Schwartz from Minneapolis, Minnesota. If you're ever in the cities, feel free to stop by the Aviary Minneapolis. It's a great time. With that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your week, and goodbye.